Okay, all right. All right, guys, we're going to get started. Welcome. We're glad that you're with us this evening.
Oh, yeah! Give it to us.
We're happy that you're here as we continue on in our series on purpose. But before we get started with that, I have a few announcements for you. First off, you guys do awesome with the name tags, okay? And thank you for doing that and checking in every week. That's a way for us just to know who's been here and who's not, so we know how to bug you and encourage you. But we have, next year, we have quite a few mission trips that are going to happen at our church. Jody is our missions director, and she has a meeting that's coming up September 11th, and it's going to be in room A103, which is right over here at 1:30 p.m. And they're going to talk about all the trips that are happening, but we have a few trips that are men only trips. One of them is going to Zambia, Africa, that I've talked to you guys about in here. So you want to be there because she'll fill you in on some of the details of that as we will go down the very 1st of July, the end of June, the 1st of July, and we're going to be doing a Legacy Men's Conference for them down there. And so we're excited to do that. But the other one is we've already decided this next year in Alaska, we are going to go back up there for 2 weeks. We have Jeremy, who was on this trip. He's our campus pastor, Jeremy Carpenter. He's our campus pastor at Scottsdale, and he already has a bunch of guys that want to go next year. And so he's going to lead the first week, and then I'm going to fly up and lead the second week. And so we're going to move it up a week, and so it's going to be all in July. We're trying to time it with the fish. If the fish would get on board with us and run when we're up there, that would be really nice. But somehow they got a mind of their own, and we got to try to figure out when are they coming up. And so this time we were on the downside of it because the surge had happened prior to us getting there. And so hopefully by moving in a week, we got 2 weeks to figure it out. Hopefully somebody will get on them. So we did grab some salmon, though, and some halibut, so we had a fun time up there. But we're trying to get in sort of the heart of that. So if you're interested, you want to go to that meeting, and then we will be promoting it and then doing signups. And we can only take a total of 11 the first week and 12 the second week on the Alaska trip. On the Zambia trip, we're looking at how we'll do it is because it's basically by vehicle, so it's going to be 7, 7, and 7. So it's either 7 going, 14 going, or 21 going. Because we have to rent vehicles, and that's where the cost comes in with renting vehicles. And so if you're at all interested, if you can't make that date and you do want to know more about it, come and talk to me or to Rod, and we'll fill you in on our mission trips. Also, we have a leadership class that is going to be held next Tuesday, and it's going to be held at 7 p.m. in room A102. And Tim Means has been leading this, and we're happy he's doing so. This is basically what he does for a living with FedEx, and he helps those guys become amazing leaders. And we invited him to come and sort of share about this with you. So if you're interested in learning more about leadership wherever you work, this might be a great class for you. So come up, Tim, and just share a little bit about what this class is about.
Yeah, not much different than the mental health sermon and message that we heard this past week. I think really one of the cool things that's happening in society right now is both from the Harvard studies, Cornell, John Maxwell, Stephen Covey, essentially are now circling back and saying, Jesus got it right. Like all of the answers that we need. So we're really trying to do 2 things with this. One is just encourage men to step forward. I think most of us would say there's a leadership void in our society, communities right now. And unfortunately, the women are killing us in that area right now, and the young boys are struggling the most. We as men oftentimes show up for sports. I have to question sometimes if that's for the development of our kids or to fulfill our own competitive nature, because we like to argue with refs and fight with the other adults there, sometimes more than develop our kids. But if you go to a lot of youth programs, you see about 5 to 1 women to men. And our young boys are really struggling. So trying to encourage men, especially men that have a love for Christ and his teaching, to begin to step forward and take and fill those leadership roles, both in community, the workplace, and the home. So that's the first purpose, is really to try to encourage. And the second purpose is to answer a question. And that question is, how do you inspire and influence a human being to operate at the peak of their capacity through serving their needs, caring for their success, and holding them accountable to an expectation of excellence. And how do you accomplish all of that at the same time? And Jesus gave us that answer, so we have a secret weapon. The answer would be to care for them and love them. And I know that that rubs a lot of people wrong, and they say, "Oh, there you go with that soft, weak stuff." And I always ask a question when people say that soft, weak stuff, because I've never seen anyone walk away from a relationship where they had to care or love another because it just wasn't challenging enough. It was just too easy that I had to walk away from caring for people because it wasn't challenging enough. And so, what we're trying to do in this program is understand that it's extremely difficult to care for people. People are going to people, they'll lie to you, they might not be grateful. How do you continue to care for them and make them successful? We have to build those tools amongst ourselves to have both the capacity and competency to do so. If we're going to help other human beings help carry their weight, we have to be pretty healthy in carrying our own at that point in time. So how do we collectively grow? I'm no teacher, I'm no professor, just a student to walk alongside. So that's what we're doing on Tuesday nights.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So if you want more information, just text to 21999 men. Also, we have a Conquer series that's going on. It started last week. It'll be here again this Tuesday in room A105, which is right across here. This is one on addiction. This is the issue of when we get into situations in our life, maybe it's marriage struggles, maybe it's work struggles, maybe it's financial struggles, we tend to lean towards an addiction. It might be alcohol or it might be pornography. And so this Conquer series really helps us overcome those kind of addictions in our life that we're struggling with. And even if you might not have one of those addictions, it's a great one to go to if you have sons, for you to understand, because especially with pornography, it is very addictive. And we want to make sure we're educating our young men to understand pornography and understand why to stay away from pornography. And so this is a great class. We do it at least once a year. Mike Batista teaches it, and he's been doing a great job with it. So if you're interested, you want to come next Tuesday to that class as well. And then we have Top Golf. My Top Golf card expires at the end of this month. If anybody is interested to golf for free from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday through Thursday, text me to that number. And again, that is not a spam number, so that is my actual number. So you can text me and say, "Hey, are you open at this time? We come to hit a few balls, and we'll play for an hour or so, or as long as my back doesn't give out, because after about 3 games, I'm shot. I don't know about you, but that's all I can handle on it. All right, and then we have fantasy football. We have, I think, 5 spots left is it. We have 4 divisions. 40 guys total, 10 on each one. We're going to be doing the draft in this room on Sunday at 2 o'clock in here. It's a live draft, and then we'll share on how it's going to go. But this is an awesome program that we have for it. We're going to be giving away some prizes, and the biggest prize is going to be a 70-inch flat screen TV, because we all cannot have enough of flat screen TVs in our house. This is the moment for you to say, "Hun, I am doing that man cave. Please." Yeah. But anyways, no. But we're going to have a lot of fun with this. We'll have some gift cards that we'll give each week for the highest score. And so it's just going to be a lot of fun. And so if you're interested, and if you have a son, they can play, but no females, okay? This is one of those that I found out. You don't have the females play with us, because what I found out with females is if they have more time on their hand, they will do all the research and studying on trades and who's injured. And next thing you know, they win it. And I don't want that to happen in our men's group. That is really dejecting, okay? So let's just keep it the guys in here. And so we'll have your wife can help you. So you can do that on the side, but she cannot be the one playing. So anyways, okay, that is it. We're continuing on, like I said, with our purpose-driven series. And last week, we had Rick Linneman here, since I was out of town in Alaska. And he came and he shared, and just understanding that God has wired us. He has instilled in us an actual purpose, and it's really our responsibility to get in connection with God and understand what that purpose is. So let me open up a word of prayer and we'll get started. God, I just pray now for this time that I have, that I would just share your word, share who you are in our lives, that we as men can understand really what your desire is for us, that we could live out our purpose, and that through living out our purpose, we would find contentment and peace. And I pray this in your son's name. Amen. If I was to sit down with you and say, tell me your biggest investments, and this is a rhetorical question because I don't need to hear what it is, but tell me your biggest investments, what would come to your mind? Would you say it would be, well, I look at my 401k almost every other day to see how the market is doing? Is it I look at my home to see if how much the price and the value is if I was to sell it today? Is that your biggest investment? Or maybe it's hey, I collect cars. I've worked on this one car. It's a classic car, and this is one of my pride and joy investments. Or maybe it's a hobby where you like hunting and you like all, there's one room that have all those, deadheads, hanging up on the wall like I have, and say, man, that's one of my biggest investments. If you were to sit down and ask me and say, what is your biggest investment? I would say without hesitation, I would say it's my family. That my family is my biggest investment. And we're going to talk today on why God sees you and I as his biggest investment. Even more than the angels. It says in the Bible, the angels envy us because God created us with this free will and loved us enough that he had a plan for salvation. He never had a plan for salvation for the angels. Once they walked away from Jesus, walked away from God, that was it. There's no way to redeem them. But because he loved us so much, he already had a plan of redemption. That's how much he loves us. And so I want to talk about this investment that God has for us. And if you have your notes, number one, when we are living in a healthy relationship with God, his desires become our desires. It's our responsibility to identify these desires and use them to fulfill God's purpose for our lives. It is up to us to identify what God's purpose is for our lives. Psalm 37:4 says, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. You notice that it first says, take delight in the Lord. It doesn't say, hey, God's going to give you the desires of your heart, and also would you delight in the Lord? Almost like, hey, I'm going to help you out first. Will you love me in return? He says, no. You delight in me, and then I'm going to instill in you my desires for your life. That's what he is saying in that verse. And it's just like growing up, my dad, I looked up to my dad. My dad was a God-honoring man. I saw him do devotions almost every day with his Bible. At one time, he used to lead in churches. He actually planted a church in Payson that is still going. It's actually the biggest church in Payson, called Ponderosa Baptist Church. I've seen my dad do a lot of things. So when I was growing up, and I will tell you, I was a screw-up. I did a lot of stupid things, and I would get in trouble a lot by my dad. And the thing that I hated to hear the most out of my dad was when he would look at me and say, son, I'm disappointed in you. See, because he had my heart. I wanted to please him. I wanted to honor him. And I wanted to do things that would honor him. And so when I didn't, he was disappointed in me. It's the same way that I lead my family with my kids, that I will look at them and I'll say, here's my desires for your life. Because I love you so much, I have these desires. And so I want you to instill in me and know my desires for you, because I love you unconditionally. Because I have a plan. I know that I want a plan and a purpose for your life, which is for you to prosper. See, God, this is how God works in our lives. And so for me, with my kids, they know my heart, and they know what I value with them. I will tell my kids unequivocally, without shame, don't have sex before marriage. And I'll tell them that because I'll tell them the statistics on how it will ruin your marriage. How you will start comparing every person that you sleep with your spouse once you have sex with all these other women. And I'll say, don't have sex before marriage because that is the worst way to start a foundation of a marriage. And I'll say that unequivocally, saying, I mean, they could do it, but understand that is not my desire for their lives. And I talk about moral purity, and I talk about when you go to choose somebody to marry, I will tell them, you better make sure your dad approves. Now, I know you're thinking, wow, that's pretty harsh, that all of a sudden you're a very militant dad. No, I'm not. See, I let them know who loves you more than anybody on this earth besides God. Who loves you more? You do, Dad. Okay? I would take a bullet for each one of my kids. Yep. Okay. So if I love you that much and you bring somebody home that I'm going, I don't know about, you better ask the question, why is my dad questioning this? Because my dad loves me unconditionally. My dad wants me to have an amazing future, an amazing relationship, an amazing marriage. Why is he questioning this? Is it just because I enjoy having conflict with my children? No, it's because I love you and I have desires for your life. I want you to have an amazing marriage, an amazing relationship. Because as we know, and as I've talked to men, one of the biggest horrible situations in a man's life is a divorce. Every one of you men that understand this are nodding your head right now because you know. And the consequences are your kids as well. And I'm trying to spare my children from that pain. But this is how God invests in our lives because he has those same desires for us as I do for my children. Going on, number 2, God invests his time and energy to work out his purpose in our lives. Understand that the purpose is not ours to choose, but it is his to choose for our lives. Romans 8:28 says this, and we know that in all things, God works, present, active, works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to my purpose. Is that what it says? My purpose? Is it my purpose that I try to do? No, it's his purpose for my life. It's his purpose. He is investing in us to fulfill his purpose in our life. My investment in my children is primary in my life. I've said this all my married life. God first, family second, career third. And it doesn't change even in ministry. I would choose to walk away from ministry before I choose to sacrifice my family over ministry. That's how important my family is because that's my investment. That's my future. That's my legacy. And I want to make sure that I am pouring into them. And I want to make sure that decisions I make, whether it's career-wise or anything, that it doesn't impact them in a huge negative way. When good things or bad things happen with my kids, I try to help them understand that this is God working in their life. Because a lot of times we struggle with this and we don't understand why God would allow bad things to happen to us. I have listed a few things of my own that now in hindsight, they were actually the best thing that could ever happen. But in the midst of it, I didn't understand what God was trying to do here. One was when my parents went bankrupt, lost everything. Best thing that ever happened. My wife and I not able to have children. Best thing that ever happened. Starting a church and having to walk away from it after 5 years. Best thing that ever happened. And you go, man, those are horrible things. Yeah, they are. But see, in God's eyes, if his purpose is to call me to do something and I do it, but in man's eyes, they see it as a failure, God sees it as a success. And the problem is nowadays in life, we get confused on this because we think there's things that we do and say, oh man, you're very successful. And so, of course, God must be blessing you. And I'll tell you, that's not always the case. Because there's times you could be successful because you've just decided, I'm going to use my gifts for my own selfish reasons and I'm going to make lots of money. And God's sitting back and going, that's not what I had for you. But there are times that we'll make decisions because we believe God's called us to do that. And other people are going to look at us and go, you're an idiot for doing that. Why are you doing that? And see, that didn't work out. See, you failed in doing that. And God's sitting there saying, no, that was my plan. And see how it can be really confusing? Because we always want to think of God as this magic genie that all of a sudden he's going to do everything we want and we're just going to have this lovely, wonderful life. And that's not it. And so part of figuring out our purpose is saying, God, what do you have for me? Even if it means I'm going to suffer, even if it means you're calling me to do something that I really don't want to do, but if this is what you've called me to do, I know I will have peace and contentment in you because I'm being obedient to what you have for me. We have a gentleman here tonight, Kevin, where, what is it, about 4 years ago, Kevin was the first one? 4 years ago, he was sharing with me that he has this brain tumor and he had to go in for surgery, and we prayed for him. He went in, they removed the brain tumor, but in the process, he had a stroke. And that's the reason why Kevin is somewhat paralyzed, and he's had to even learn to talk all over again. Well, he talked to me when I was in Alaska, and he had some really some disappointing news because they found brain tumors again. And they're going to have to do surgery again, and he doesn't know what the future holds. But one of the things I told Kevin, and this is hard, I said, Kevin, I don't know why God's chosen you to go through this, but I know you're in his will. I know you're honoring God in this. And I prayed for him to be honored and glorified using Kevin, whether it's with doctors or nurses and whatever the outcome is. God has found Kevin worthy to go through this. And that's a hard thing for us all to understand at times. Because we all want to be healthy, right? We all want to be okay financially. We want our kids to be okay. But that might not be God's purpose for your life. And the quicker you understand that, the quicker you are going to be at peace at whatever he calls you to do in life. Number 3, how God chooses to use us is not up to us to decide. Fairness is not equality. See, we think that the way that we are, back to what I was talking about, that somehow everybody should be on the same playing field with God. Once we come to a following of God, that we're all healthy, we all have wonderful lives, we don't suffer, we don't struggle, we don't have persecution, that everything is fine. I don't know about you, but in raising my kids, I've had to explain to them, look, fairness is not equality. That the way I choose to take care of one kid is going to be different than how I choose to take care of another. Well, Dad, why did you let them drive at 16 and I can't drive until I'm 18? Well, maybe it's because you're a horrible driver. And I don't want you damaging cars. But that's not fair. No, it is fair, because as your father, I understand what's best for you. And that's how God uses us. He will use us for a purpose. And sometimes we don't like that purpose, and we're looking over there saying, but I want that purpose. I want to do that thing. You know, I illustrated with tools. Tools are meant for a specific purpose. You know, I hold this tool up. I think everybody knows what this is for. This is for smashing things, pounding things in the ground, breaking up concrete. I've done a lot with this, okay? But the thing I can't do with this is I can't remove a screw from a wall. Or I could try to put a screw in the wall, but that would have some repairs to it, right? But if I want to take a screw out of the wall, I'm going to use this. This is called a Phillips screwdriver. And it has a specific purpose in mind for this, right? And then you get into these wrenches, and you go, okay, I have a bunch of wrenches, and the reason why I have more than one is because there's bolts that are different sizes. This one is for a 5/16. That's it. It can't be a 1/2 inch. It can't be a 17 millimeter. It is used for a 5/16. But then I have one that, you need a 17 millimeter? I have a 17 millimeter. But if you're needing a 16 millimeter, this ain't going to work. And the same with this one. This one is 11 millimeter. If you need a 10 millimeter or 12 millimeter, this won't work. But sometimes God looks at our lives and says, no, this is what I have planned for you. This is your purpose in life. You're a 5/16. Don't desire to be an 11 millimeter. Just don't. But here's the thing I will tell you. Sometimes God calls you to be one of these bad boys. This is a crescent wrench. See, in the crescent wrench, it could take care of a 5/16. It could take care of a 17 millimeter. It could take care of 11 millimeter. And sometimes God calls us to a season in life and says, this is your purpose during this season, but then all of a sudden that season will close. Next thing you know, you're serving another purpose. So understand that in life, your purpose might change. So don't get set in your ways to say, oh, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do the rest of my life. This is what God's called me. No, you might be like that crescent wrench, and he's going to change your purpose, and you got to be okay with that. That's the reason why Psalm 37:4 says, delight yourself in the Lord. And when we're doing that, we'll get to understand more of, okay, God, what are you doing? Why are you moving me from this job? Why am I having to move to this location? Because now this is your purpose. This is what I've called you to do. And when we're delighting in the Lord, we'll be content in making that decision. Lastly, for God's goal is to have his investment in us to pay dividends for his glory. See, we all want, when we invest in something, we always want dividends. We want a payoff. We want something to say, what do I have to show for the investment? And God's saying, I'm investing in you. I continue to invest in you. I continue to work in your lives for the sole reason to glorify me. Not to glorify you, but to glorify me. I'm your heavenly Father. I'm investing in you. I want to see dividends from your life. Here's what it says in 1 Peter 4:10-11. Each of you should use whatever gifts you have received to serve yourself. Is that what it says there? Others. Serve others. Your gifts are given to you not for your sake, but for other people's sake. As faithful stewards of God's grace in the various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be glory and power forever and ever. Amen. Guys, I've said this before in here. The skills that you guys have in this room, God gave to you not for the purpose of you to make money and take care of your family. That's a secondary. Primary is for you to bless others with the skill sets that he has given you. And the best place to do that is in the local church. You're able to serve. And I love it because I see a lot of you men out there serving, whether it's at our men's booth, whether it is helping people park cars, whether it is holding a sign saying welcome here, or running one of the cameras. You guys are everywhere. And that's the way it should be, because God's giving you those skill sets and you got to use them. And if you're not using them, you're not totally fulfilling his purpose in your life to glorify him. You're not doing it. And so my challenge to you is to make sure that you're doing what God has called you to do. And when you do that, you will be content in doing that assignment. There's a picture that Rod's going to put up here. This is of a U-21 King Air. So when we're in Alaska, the very first day we got there, I noticed that this King Air actually, both engines were out, and they were laying on these crates with the propellers down. And I found out from Peter that this U-21 had come up with what is called a hot inspection. Do we have any pilots or mechanics in the room with pilots? Okay, all right. So I got to make sure I know what I'm talking about now. So all the other ones, they're like, nobody's in there. Okay, so I could kind of blow it off. But this is called a hot inspection. A hot inspection is there is a expiration date on these engines that once you hit those running hours, you have to do what is called a hot inspection. The hot inspection is over $100,000 to have this hot inspection done. And what they have to do is they have to take these engines out. They have to ship them to a third party, and the third party has to inspect it, making sure there's no cracks, no warps in it. And if they do this hot inspection, they're allowed to run these engines for approximately another 3,600 hours. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but these King Airs, they fly them about 200 to 300 hours a year. So it gets them quite a few more years of flying this King Air. But when I was there was 4 guys that were working on this. And these 4 guys were very meticulous, and I would go up and I'd ask them questions about it. And I found out that these are actually jet engines with a propeller on it. And I said, well, how does that work? And right away, you could see these guys' eyes light up. Oh, let me tell you how it works. You got this tube, and you got the oxygen that goes in here, and you got the fuel that is pumped around here. And by the about third or fourth sentence, I'm already thinking about salmon fishing. Like, all right, I don't know. Okay, good. It runs. I'm happy for you. Good thing. But for them, this was exciting. And I watched over the 2 weeks how they were meticulously, because they had gotten the inspection back on them, putting these engines back in. And they were going through with a fine-tooth comb. Matter of fact, I looked in every little screw that they have, every little bolt, there's a hole in the head, and what they have to do is they've got to take a wire, they put the wire through that, and they'll tie it to another bolt. And the reason why is because if there's vibration in this engine, and one of those bolts starts to move, they know it's not going to spin all the way out, and all of a sudden it could blow up this jet engine. And so they do that with every one of those. And every one of them has to be torqued to a certain specification. Then after that, they have this little pressure tester that they have to go through. And I watched them do these pressure tests on the engine. Then they had to flush the engines 4 times to make sure there was not any dirt and debris in them. This is before they even fired them up. And I sat back and I went, man, it is amazing on how God wired these guys for that purpose. That every one of these airplane mechanics, they spend more time working on these to make sure that they're flying correctly than they do actually flying them. But here's what you have to get about it. The reason why they do all this, the reason why they'll spend so much time meticulously making sure that these engines are running at top-notch speeds and that there's nothing wrong with them, is for the opportunity for them to fly into one of these villages and pick up some children that live in a village that there's no way you can get to this village except by plane. And they pick up these children and they take them out of that village and they will put them into I sound like they're smuggling these kids, but their parents approve of this, and they get to go to a Christian camp. Got to make sure the way I'm saying that, like, but they invite them to go to a Christian camp, and they will take them to a Christian camp. And these guys, their prayer and their hope is that, first off, nothing goes wrong with the engine, nothing goes wrong with the plane, so that these children could hear about Jesus. And that's what they've been called to do. They're not the ones sharing Jesus. They're the ones transporting them so that they have an opportunity to hear Jesus by people that are running a Christian camp. And they do it with delight. They do it because they know they've been called to do it. I look at that, and when I was watching them meticulously do it, I'm like, it couldn't happen. And maybe it's the ADD in me. I'm like, oh no, I would be, thinking of other things and not focusing on the task at hand. But these guys meticulously focus in on that because they know this is what they're called to do. And so my challenge to you is this. Are you really doing what God's called you to do? Are you content in where you are? Are you at peace? Even though, yes, we all have challenges and stuff. Or maybe it's one of these, man, I've been job hunting, go from one job to another, one home to another, one state to another, and maybe you really haven't found your purpose yet. And maybe it's because, all the way back to the very first verse, maybe it's because you haven't first stopped and delighted yourself in the Lord and allowed Him to give you the desires of your heart. Because when you have that, then you know, I'm at peace. No matter what happens to me, no matter what happens financially, no matter what happens, I'm at peace because I know I'm where God wants me to be. I have figured out what my purpose in life is. And so let me pray for you, and then you guys have some discussions at your table to go over. God, I pray again for these men in here that as they are wrestling that through in their life, would you just really make sure that they realize and understand what their purpose is and what you have called them to do. And I pray that this time of discussion will be really healthy and really profitable for these men. And I pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.